Hello everyone, let's take a look at the immune system. First of all, the main jobs of the immune system. They need to provide protection from pathogens. Interestingly enough, it's hard to pinpoint the immune system. It's not like you can just point to one organ and say, there it is, like a heart or a stomach. The immune system is everywhere in the body. It's cells, different types of cells that have different functions that provide you protection to help you maintain homeostasis to protect you from pathogens. Well, all living things have an immune system of some type or some sort of protection from pathogens. What are the types of pathogens? These are the main ones. We usually recognize bacteria and viruses, especially as we hit cold and flu season, as being the main types of pathogens. But you may not have thought that there's other ones out there, like different funguses, mold, yeast can act as pathogens, different protists like amoeba. There's certain ones of those that can be pathogens, and different parasites, even animals, can act like pathogens, like a tapeworm. But as we go through our notes, we'll mostly be focusing on bacteria and viruses. So how do you pick up a pathogen? There's different ways it can come to you through the air. Some pathogens can live in the air for quite a while, especially if they're surrounded by moisture, like mucus droplets that you sneezed or coughed out. You can pick it up by touch, and just like in air, some organisms can actually live, and also viruses can stay together if they're on a surface for hours to days. It depends on what it is. You can find pathogens in blood and pick it up through like transfusions and such, through open wounds, and in body fluids as well, such as in sexual contact. So mucus would be an example of a body fluid. Note my color coordination here: green mucus. Saliva, blood, sweat, genital fluids, and not often urine. Urine usually is kind of sterile, but if you had a urinary tract infection, urine could have pathogens in it. How to get in the body? Well, you have a lot of openings if you think about it. Not all things are closed up. Your eyes, when you rub your eyes. Ears are a doorway to the body, definitely. Nose, that's a big one. Rubbing your nose, putting your fingers in your mouth. Those are all ways to have pathogens enter. And wounds, and then of course through sexual contact, the genital openings and the anus. Those are all doorways where pathogens can enter. But these doorways, hopefully they would have some sort of protection. So such as your eyes have tears, your nose and inside your mouth you have mucus, inside your nose you have little hairs called cilia that constantly sweep outward, and even the cilia in your lungs sweep outward. You have cells that make wax in your ears, and then the hairs help to carry that wax outward, and different fluids like urine moving outward and saliva moving outward helps to carry things out. And you also have a protein or an enzyme called lysozyme that's in your saliva that helps to destroy pathogens like bacteria when they enter. It doesn't work with everything, but it is one form of general protection. Normally we would do a disease simulation lab here, but we will reschedule that as we go through. And I would show you my wonderful safety glasses cabinet, how neat it is, and should always stay that way. But we'll reschedule that and either do that next time I see you, or in a virtual simulation. So let's look at non-specific defenses, things that are really general in the way that we take care of pathogens that enter our bodies. So first of all, a very general way to protect ourselves from pathogens is our skin. It covers and protects. There are some doorways, as we already said, in the skin, though, like our eyes, our nose, and our mouth, our genital openings and such. But skin is the largest organ of the body and covers almost all of it. Plus, on the skin, you secrete antibiotic enzymes. Plus, it's a place where bacteria already live, and many of the bacteria that live there are what you call good bacteria. And it's actually a good thing having them there. It sounds gross, but it's good that they're there because they help to create competition for when the bad bacteria land on your skin. Hopefully the good guys will win. They will have competition for the space and the resources. Hopefully the good bacteria will win. That's why sometimes you have to be careful about overusing things like hand sanitizer, because it actually kills the good bacteria as well. And sometimes we want those good bacteria there. One of the first lines of defense when something enters is called the macrophage. I like to think of them as like the patrol officers of the body. Macro means big and phage means cell. So basically, macrophage translates to what's called a big white blood cell. And these big white blood cells patrol basically everywhere, wandering through your blood and your tissues. And their job is to notice when there's a foreign invader, like a bacteria or even a cell that's been taken over by a virus. They need to know that, they need to recognize it's an invader, and then they engulf it through what we've already learned about, through endocytosis or phagocytosis, where they engulf, they send their phospholipid bilayer out around whatever it is that they found that was foreign, and then they engulf it into themselves, where they can then merge it with lysosomes and then eat it and get rid of it for you. So they literally patrol and hunt, and they recognize pathogens. So how do they know when they have come across a pathogen? That's a good question. Well, it's basically mostly about the proteins on the surface of your cells. We talked about cell membranes having the phospholipid bilayer, but we also talked about cells having proteins embedded in that bilayer. So your proteins are specific to you, and proteins from invaders are specific to them. So it's up to the immune system cells, like macrophages, to recognize when there's foreign proteins in the body. So that's really what they're looking at, is those proteins on the cell surface. And they should have the ability to know that, oh, these are mine, or oh, no, these are not mine. I need to attack. And if they can't launch their own attack, they can call for other cells to come to the area to help out. And so macrophages can release certain chemicals that call for our next line of defense, which we're going to call our helper T cells. And helper T cells can actually release chemicals as well if it's really bad, and call even more cells to the area from the immune system. Sometimes macrophages are just not enough to take care of a problem. Sometimes you need more help than that. So what we just talked about here are basically our general ways to protect you, such as the skin, covering and protecting, and your macrophages, and then having certain fluids and cilia and things like that, and bacteria on your skin. Those are all general, non-specific ways that your immune system tries to ward off invaders. But sometimes we need more than just general help. We need more specific defenses. So let's talk next about specific ways to kill off invaders. Now, this first way, this is called cell-mediated. This is really good for battling viruses when they get into you. So cell-mediated means that these cells can kill specific invaders like viruses. So think of it as lines of defense here. First of all, macrophages have come to the area and they have realized that, oops, these invaders don't belong here. Or maybe it's a cell that's infected with invaders. There's ways to tell that as well. So the macrophages now have released a chemical to bring on the next specific line of defense, to call for cell-mediated defense. So, like I said before, macrophages are like the patrol. Our next line of defense, I like to think of them as like the detectives of the immune system. They get called next. They're called helper T cells, and T cells, T means thymus. You have a thymus gland, it's right here above your lungs. It works the best when you're young. The younger you are, the better your thymus gland works. As you get older, it kind of deteriorates, which goes to show as you get older, it's harder to ward off these pathogens because your thymus gland kind of deteriorates, unfortunately. But the helper T cells mature in the thymus gland, and they go out, and when they get called to an area, they're like the detectives and they take a look and say, yep, there's a problem here. So they release another chemical that calls on, oh my goodness, we call on these guys, it must be serious. They call the killer T cells, and their name is as bad as it sounds. These are killers. They are like what I think of as like the snipers or the SWAT team of the immune system. If they come to the area, look out. Because at first, the idea is to just launch an attack. Because generally, if this kind of attack is going on, we probably had an area of cells that were invaded by viruses. And viruses usually attack by injecting their genetic material into our cells, into our host cells. And so then they start reproducing within our cells. And the cells that this is happening to take pieces of the virus protein and display them on their surface as kind of a way to say, I'm done for, but everybody else, save yourself. This is like a warning signal. So these killer T cells come to this area and start just spraying chemicals on everything. So good cells and infected cells will get killed by these chemicals coming out of these killer T cells. It's like these killer T cells will not negotiate, and they will just start launching this attack of chemicals. And it's one of our first lines of defense. You can't keep going like this, though. You can't just keep letting killer T cells kill everything. So things will get more specific as we go, but that takes time. So our killer T cells are going to buy us some time so that we can get smarter and be better able to recognize the invaders and better able to recognize the actual cells that are infected with invaders, so that we don't have to kill anybody who is not infected. But this is like gonna buy us some time. All right, so these killer T cells launching out all their chemicals, killing all these cells in sight. So this gives you kind of an answer of like when you have a cold or when you have the flu, why you might have a sore throat. It's those killer T cells killing patches of millions of cells in your throat and in your respiratory system. And it's also why after like a cold or the flu, you have to cough up so much mucus and junk. Those are all dead cells coming out of you because of these killer T cells and what they did in like the beginning of the battle against this foreign invader. All right, so keep it straight. We had the patrol officers. The macrophages arrive on scene. They realized this just wasn't one thing they could engulf and get rid of, so they released chemicals, and they called the helper T cell detectives to the area. They realized, yep, this is bad. Call on the killer T cells, the snipers, the SWAT team, and they started killing everything in sight. We had a full-blown war going on. In the meantime, hopefully that will buy us some time while this next thing is going to take place. While that was cell-mediated, cells springing into action, you have another line of defense that's even more specific yet. It's called anti-mediated defense. Antibodies are proteins. You make antibodies. All right, you have to make these, and you make them in your B cells. However, B cells are not out wandering about and patrolling. They basically stick like way down in the immune system, down in your lymph nodes and such. So we have to take the message to them. This is why killer T cells have to borrow us some time by killing things off so much where they're at. So B cells are like I like to call them the bomb squad. They're really smart about what they do. They're really specific about what they do. They come from your bone marrow. Actually, all of these cells come from your bone marrow, but the T cells mature in the thymus. The B cells come directly from the bone marrow, from stem cells there. And so you've got all these different B cells living around in your lymph nodes and such. And they're just kind of hanging out and waiting around. They need a signal. So, as also part of this war, we need the spies, right? We need a spy. So we have what are called these dendritic cells. They are the spies. And what they do is they collect samples of the invader's protein, like the virus proteins. They take them and they carry them deep into the immune system to the lymph nodes. These virus or invader proteins are called antigens. They carry them to the lymph nodes and then they present them to all of the cells down there. All the B cells just kind of hanging out, having a good time in the lymph nodes. Finally, the dendritic cells arrive with those antigens and they present them to the B cells, and the B cells all kind of pass by and check it out until you finally find the right B cell who recognizes that antigen. And the recognition comes from, it reminds me of like a pen and a cap. The B cell will have a protein on its surface that fits exactly like a lock and a key to the antigen or the virus protein, and they lock together, and right away that B cell is like, yes, I've got it. And that B cell then starts rapidly dividing again and again to make thousands and millions of themselves. And it's those B cells then, that specific type, who recognize that antigen by locking in with it, like a lock and a key. It reproduces again and again and makes the antibodies. So the B cells still stay where they're at, but they make those antibodies who are like a key. And those antibodies get sent out into the blood and everywhere into the lymph nodes, lymph system, and they go to the site. And it's the antibody's job to lock in with the virus protein. By locking into the virus protein, then it deactivates the virus. It makes that virus much more easily to spot by like macrophages. It kind of marks it for destruction, makes them easier to carry out. It also helps the killer T cells recognize it much better. So it's these antibodies, these proteins that your B cells make, send out, and they go to the site and lock onto those viruses, those virus antigens, like a lock and a key, marking them for destruction. So that's why I call B cells the bomb squad, because they know how to defuse the bomb. There's specific ones in there that can do it. You just have to take this time and days to do that. So in the meantime, you kind of have to suffer the wrath of these killer T cells killing all your cells in an area, while you get time for the spies, the dendritic cells, to get down in there, present the antigen, find the correct B cells. Then those B cells rapidly reproduce, make their antibodies, send the antibodies out, and then the antibodies can mark those viruses for destruction. Now, the nice thing then is your killer T cells get much better, and they can hone in on who's infected, on the host cells that are infected, and leave the ones that are fine alone, but get the ones that are infected. So they stop making virus particles, and then macrophages can help clear the viruses out because they're marked for destruction. And then after all of that is done, usually the nice thing about this is you keep some of those B cells around, and then we call them memory B cells. Those memory B cells can live in your lymph nodes, and the next time that something like this happens, they can spring into action much, much more faster than what was happening the first time you were infected. If you encounter the same exact infection again, those memory cells rapidly reproduce, rapidly make those antibodies, and the antibodies lock onto those antigens of the invaders, and you take care of them before you even get sick. How nice is that? For many diseases, this lasts your lifetime. For some of them, it doesn't. I know, like, for some of them, you need a booster shot, like tetanus. You need a booster shot. That's a bacteria that you could get. I get a booster shot every 10 years for that. If a virus mutates or evolves, then those memory B cells might not work anymore, and you might have to experience it all over again. So it all depends. But this is the beauty of the immune system. So many cells working together to help you maintain homeostasis. There's my analogy. Macrophages are like the patrol officers. Helper T cells are like the detectives. Killer T cells are like the SWAT or the snipers. Dendritic cells are like the spy. And B cells like the bomb squad. And the antibodies, maybe they're like handcuffs for the virus or bomb diffusers. So this is all a good way to remember this type of response. There's other type of responses too, but this is one that is kind of easy to remember if you think of it like this. All right, so we'll be taking a look at some videos to see these different things. We're going to take a look at a video that shows how we fight viruses. We're going to take a look at one that shows how we fight bacteria. It's a little bit different than what I showed here. And eventually we'll also be looking more at immunity and immunizations or vaccinations. And then we'll also be taking a look at allergies. Allergies are caused by the immune system as well. So stay tuned.